You see a flyer from your local police department. Friendly colors, a badge, a QR code that reads free house checks while you're on vacation. Seems helpful, right? But what if scanning that QR code meant you give complete and total access to the police, to your home cameras, your data, and even your legal rights? What if it opened the door to a kind of surveillance system watching you that you didn't even know you agreed to? Here's what makes this even more crazy. Police departments, they're doing it right now. Grapevine, Texas, they have a vacation check while you're away program where they'll drop by and take a look inside your house and everything else you've got going on while you're out of town. Grand Prairie Police Department in Texas, they use QR code signups for both vacation check-ins and a mental health registry. And Cedar Hill PD, they invite you to register all your home security cameras and integrate them into their system so that now your private property has voluntarily become a police surveillance node. You might see these QR codes on flyers, police websites, or even community functions. They look official, helpful, and even harmless. But behind it all, you're giving up all of your constitutional rights. I'm Jeff Hampton, the People's Lawyer, and in today's video, I'm pulling back the curtain on police community opt-in programs and how they affect your rights. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you, number one, how these community programs actually work. Number two, what you might be unknowingly agreeing to. And then number three, how even well-meaning people trying to protect their communities can sign up for a program that leads to a constitutional nightmare. In the next few minutes, we're walking through the real cases, the legal loopholes, and the data sharing policies nobody ever talks about. Let's start with Jane. She scans a QR code from her local PD offering free vacation house checks. She fills out a form, gives her trip dates, and leaves for Disney with her kids. When Officer Smith comes to check on the house, he peeks through a window and sees something on the coffee table, her teenage son's bong. That bong was now in plain view. Jane returned to a court summons. Her consent to the house check gave the officer legal grounds to dig around and observe and report anything suspicious, including her son's bong. Jane thought she was signing up for security, but what she was really signing up for was surveillance. And here's the part no one tells you. Once the cops are in, they don't need a warrant to look around and use anything they find against you. These programs, they're cropping up everywhere. Flyers from cities like Tonawanda, New York, inviting you to register your cameras, sign up for vacation checks, or even give police keys to a home via a Knox box. They sound harmless. They even seem helpful. But every time you sign one of these forms, you're leaving a paper trail of consent where cops can do almost anything they want. Some cities, they call it SafeCam. Other communities label it as Community Connect or Public Safety Access. Police departments love to use these names because they sound like partnerships. But these are not partnerships, they're pipelines. Pipelines from your personal space into a growing law enforcement infrastructure built on data access, facial recognition, and algorithmic surveillance. Cops love to use camera registration as one of the most common techniques. You tell police, hey, I have a camera here. I'm willing to sign up and keep my community safe. Well, they don't have live access to your cameras yet, but they do have your registration. But now your home has been flagged by the police as a surveillance source. If there's a crime nearby, they're going to come to you and request the footage. And if that footage shows anything illegal, even if it had nothing to do with that particular crime, you've already volunteered it. You might think, well, I'm not worried about this, Jeff. I've got nothing to hide. But what if your camera captures someone else doing something questionable? Now you're a part of the investigation, whether you meant to be or not. Some cities go even further. They'll incentivize you for signing up, or they'll give you a public shout out. What cops don't explain to you is how long your footage is retained, who else might have access to it, and who else gets to use it years down the road. For example, Detroit's Project Greenlight started just like one of these community partnerships. But over time, it evolved into a citywide network of live camera feeds being fed into a real-time crime network for the city. Over 500 locations including gas stations, apartment buildings, and churches, streaming footage, live footage to the police department 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it didn't stop there. Detroit's Project Greenlight began to layer in facial recognition software as part of the surveillance. And the results? Troubling to say the least. Robert Williams was arrested and jailed based on a facial match. He was innocent and wrongfully charged. Portia Woodruff, 8 months pregnant, was detained in front of her own kids, also wrongly identified. And LaDonna Crutchfield was arrested and held for hours based on another incorrect match. All started from a community partnership program. This is what can happen when citizens volunteer their private information to be tied in to a faulty algorithm and AI-driven process run by the police department. So wait, let's stop for a moment and let's talk about the legality around these programs. Let's look at real cases and look at specific examples of where it applies. Number 1, the consent exception to the Fourth Amendment. Imagine your front yard is a stage. Normally, police must get a warrant in order to enter your stage of your yard and begin to snoop around. But if you happen to put a sign out front that says, "Come on in and take a look," they no longer need a warrant. They now have your permission. And once they're there, anything they see, even if it's behind the curtain, it's all fair game to be used against you. In Schneckcloth versus Bustamante, the Supreme Court ruled that cops don't have to prove that you actually understand your constitutional rights. They only have to prove that you voluntarily said yes. When you scan a QR code offering a free house check while you're on vacation, or to register your camera for community safety, you are essentially giving your digital handshake to the police to waive your rights. And that handshake will hold up in court. So even if you don't realize what you agreed to and you didn't read the fine print, it doesn't really matter. The cops know that the paper trail when you consented invited them into your home, and that's all that will matter in court. Number 2, the third party doctrine. Let's say you give your neighbor a spare key to your house. If they let someone else in, that's on them. But the court might still treat it as if you gave them permission to enter. That's how the third-party doctrine works. If you share your data with someone else, even a harmless city registry, you may have forfeited the right to claim any of that data was private. This doctrine came from the case of Smith versus Maryland, where the court said that phone records handed to a company were no longer protected under the Fourth Amendment. Now, apply that to your QR code form. You volunteered the information. You then gave it to a third party. That means courts may now say it's no longer protected and cops can get access to it without a warrant. Number 3, the plain view doctrine. Picture a police officer walking down your sidewalk because you signed up for a house check while you're on vacation. He walks up and looks through your window and sees what he thinks is a bag of drugs on the table. Even if he had no reason to be suspicious before, now that he's seen this bag in plain view and he has your voluntary access into your home, he can walk right in and start looking around. Under this doctrine, anything plainly visible from a public vantage point or a vantage point the officer had a legal right to be in is now seizable as evidence. In Coolidge versus New Hampshire in 1971, the Supreme Court cemented this principle and put this plain view doctrine in play. It doesn't matter if the officer was there for your safety or for a sweep. You invited them in and they saw something they thought was illegal. So all of it is now fair game. Number 4, the principle of Riley versus California. In Riley, the court ruled that police searching a smartphone during an arrest requires a separate warrant because the data on the phone is so very personal. But here's the nuance. If you've already shared the data through a QR registry or some sort of voluntary program, that protection may no longer apply. Think of it like this. The case of Riley protects and guards the phone in your pocket. But if you emailed your camera footage or uploaded your contact details voluntarily, that's not in your pocket anymore. It's now in someone else's system. Number 5, the principle behind Katz versus United States. This is the case that said the Fourth Amendment protects people, not places. It introduced to all of us the idea of the reasonable expectation of privacy. But courts have held that when you register your surveillance gear or you sign up voluntarily for a program, you've given away your reasonable expectation of privacy. Your QR code scan could now be interpreted not just as a sign up, but now as a waiver. Once you invite law enforcement in your home, you no longer have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Number 6, the principle of Heibel versus Nevada. This ruling said that police can require you to give your name in certain situations. Why does this matter in the QR code context? Because now, through voluntarily opting in, you're not just giving your name, you're often handing over your address, your camera angles, your emergency contacts, and your home layout. You're not just identifying yourself now, you're cataloging yourself. And when that info enters a centralized registry, which is now run by third parties, your information not only hits the neighborhood police, it could also be hitting state intelligence, DHS, or even ICE. Now I want to pause and ask you, how do we really know if the news we are reading is unbiased and fair? With competing narratives, media bias, and big tech censorship, cutting through the noise to see what's really happening isn't always easy. Luckily, there is a solution. Ground News gives you the freedom to discover whether what you are reading is unbiased and fair so that you can come to your own conclusions. Isn't that what the news is supposed to be about? Check them out for yourself at ground.news/Hampton. Let's take the recent decision by the U.S. Department of Justice to abandon police reform settlements with Minneapolis and Louisville. Agreements that were initiated after the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. As we analyze the coverage, the top right displays key details: the number of sources reporting, their political bias distribution, reliability ratings, and ownership information. These insights help reveal how different outlets are shaping the narrative. One of the most powerful features of Ground News is the headline comparison. Here we can see for ourselves how stories are being framed by different news outlets. By clicking on the left, center, and right, we can observe the language and tone used, allowing us to draw our own conclusions. For instance, a left-leaning headline might focus on civil rights implications, while a right-leaning headline might emphasize federal overreach concerns. My favorite feature, though, is the blind spot feed. With Blind Spot, you can see news stories that are being disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. In our polarized environment, I have found this feature to be an amazing resource to discover news stories that I might have missed otherwise because only one side was talking about it. It's perfect for better understanding friends and family who think differently. The best part? Ground News has a special offer for all of my viewers. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, the same plan I use to get unlimited access to all their features. Go to ground.news/Hampton to give it a try yourself. Click the link down in the description or scan the QR code to stay better informed and transform the way you read the news. The problem with this is consent is such a slippery slope. Think of consent as lending someone your car. You gave permission to only have them drive it to a short trip to the store. But what if they drive it across state lines, or they let someone else drive it? That's how QR code-based consent works. It may start with a simple request, like a vacation check on your home, but it'll travel much farther than you expect. And the courts? They'll just look at you and say, well, what do you mean? You gave them the keys. That's why the police want you to sign up for these QR code programs, because they're so powerful, but yet they are so risky to your constitutional rights. Take the case of Chicago's private infrastructure camera system. In Chicago, police don't just rely on city-owned cameras. They've built out a massive network that includes access to private security systems at apartment complexes, churches, and even local businesses, often through more voluntary program agreements. These arrangements, they're not regulated by city ordinance or law. It's because they're informal and they're voluntary. Police ask, businesses and residents comply, and now police have complete control with no oversight and no accountability. What about Atlanta's Connect ATL program? Atlanta's Connect ATL initiative promotes public-private camera sharing, encouraging residents and businesses to register their cameras. Police don't even need a subpoena to request the footage. It's voluntarily offered, and often in bulk. According to city documents, more than 3,000 cameras throughout the city are connected to Atlanta's real-time crime centers, where this place where the cops are located in the PD is literally a surveillance hub where they are monitoring all that they see and hear throughout the city. The public has no visibility on how all this footage is being stored, what they're doing with the data, whether it's for a criminal investigation or for their own sake of surveillance. So what happens next? Once the cops have all of your data and your footage, where does this go? It's at this point, all of your data and all of your footage enters a broader surveillance network, and it often does not stop with local law enforcement. This is where police love to feed your data and your footage into police predictive modeling tools. Programs like PredPol, ShotSpotter, and Clearview AI claim to use data to, quote, anticipate criminal behavior. But studies have shown that these predictive models disproportionately target both Black and Latino neighborhoods, that end up in wrongful arrests and people being charged and their rights being taken away. A 2021 study by the University of California, Berkeley found that predictive policing systems, quote, amplify feedback loops of enforcement, leading to over-policing in areas flagged not by crime, but by past enforcement. Even more concerning, what if you volunteered personal information, like medical information or mental health information? This information is now being used for the enforcement of red flag gun confiscation laws. In states like California, New York, and Florida, police can petition courts to seize firearms from individuals deemed at risk. While some of this is definitely necessary for public safety, a lot of this can actually be triggered under the name of public safety concerns, all from information you have volunteered as part of a volunteer community program. If you make it past all of this, your data is then routed through what's known as a fusion center. Fusion centers are joint federal state intelligence hubs that aggregate data from social services, law enforcement, and even private companies. Here's the worst part. Once your data that you agreed to share for a community safety program hits a fusion center, it's impossible to track, erase, or do anything about. You see, fusion centers are the silent backbone of modern surveillance. They're not in every headline, but they are behind every scan, every shared file, and every piece of, quote, suspicious activity flagged through programs you voluntarily joined. These 80-plus regional hubs were born out of post-9/11 surveillance efforts. The idea behind these hubs originally was to prevent future attacks by improving the coordination between federal and local agencies. In theory, smart idea. In practice, it didn't quite turn out that way. Fusion centers are now designed to aggregate data. What kind of data? Think 911 calls, license plate hits, camera footage, public school security feeds, real-time social media monitoring, and more. And now, those voluntary QR code programs to keep your community safe are now a part of that pipeline. Here is how. Number one, a resident scans a QR code on a flyer and registers their cameras or emergency information. Number two, that information is sent to local police. Number three, from there it may be passed through integrated platforms like Fusus or Vigilant Solutions, which sync with regional fusion centers. Number four, that fusion center then becomes a clearinghouse for the FBI, DHS, ICE, Border Patrol, state and local agencies, and private contractors. You might be thinking, come on, Jeff, you sound paranoid. I wish I was just being paranoid, but it's actually been documented. The ACLU, EFF, and investigative journalists all over the country have published multiple reports on fusion centers sharing information beyond their mandate, like tracking protesters or cataloging religious organizations. Take Minneapolis. In 2020, fusion center data was used to monitor peaceful George Floyd protesters using aerial drones, license plate readers, and crowd facial recognition. Much of it sourced from those same community partnerships. Let's stop for a minute and imagine you're giving someone a map to your neighborhood. You just want them to check on your house. But instead, they photocopy your map, they mark all of your neighbor's properties, and they hand it off to 5 different agencies. That's the function of fusion centers with QR code volunteer community programs. What starts as community safety turns into regional and nationwide tracking. Now, why does all this matter? Here's the thing, fusion centers operate almost under no oversight. There's no single law governing whether a fusion center can do something with your data, share it with someone else, or use it for something maybe even illegal. You might have signed up by your good friend Officer Davis at your local precinct. But once you've scanned that QR code, your name and your footage and all your personal data sits on a federal server to be accessed by people you've never met. So if your local police department is the front door of your surveillance, think of these fusion centers as the dark basement. It's dark, it's massive, and full of file cabinets you never knew existed. And once your information is stored there, it's almost impossible to ever get it back. So before you scan that QR code, ask yourself, are you really helping your community? Or are you fueling a surveillance network you'll never see that will be used against everyone? Finally, let's take a look at some real cities doing exactly the same thing across the country so that you'll know if your data is at risk. Phoenix, Arizona. The Phoenix Police Department has a Camry registry program called Virtual Block Watch. Here, residents are encouraged to scan a code or visit a link at community events to sign up their security system. What about Baltimore, Maryland? After years of surveillance programs, including aerial spying, Baltimore PD now pushes neighborhood QR-based community safety check-ins, which will collect your name, your home data, and camera angles. Minneapolis, Minnesota has a community camera program. This program uses an opt-in form to map residential surveillance system. The city links this data with its real-time crime information center, which is a live monitoring system shared with fusion centers and analysts nationwide. What about New York PD's Operation SafeCam? NYPD promotes community registration through their online portals and QR scan stations at precinct events. These are then logged in coordination with the Domain Awareness System, a citywide surveillance engine connected to the Department of Homeland Security. What about Chicago's Private Sector Camera Initiative? We covered this a little bit earlier, but CPD allows businesses and residents to register their cameras, and they post flyers, including QR code links at town halls and meetings. And the footage is then accessible to the Crime Prevention and Information Center as well as the city's Fusion Center. San Diego, California has a similar program known as the Community Connect System, which invites fire and police services into your building's layout and camera data. It is a QR-driven setup and is marketed as life-saving, but the backend includes data sharing with agencies all over the country. Each of these programs uses marketing language like, quote, partnership, quote, neighborhood safety, and quote, public service. But behind every flyer is a form, and behind every form is a network watching all of us. Imagine what this will all look like in 2030. Let's zoom forward 5 years. You live in a city that has upgraded its security infrastructure. Now, instead of requesting camera footage, law enforcement has API-level access to thousands of home systems. Flyers, they're no longer the cop's entry point. It's your HOA, your landlord, and even your workspace. Everyone is now partnering with law enforcement for everyone's safety. Your doorbell footage now syncs live with police headquarters. If your camera captures a loud voice or an unauthorized visitor, AI flags it for review. The flag gets logged, not just for you, but for your entire block. You didn't commit a crime, but now your property has been flagged as being frequently monitored. Your insurance premiums suddenly go up. Your visitors start getting flagged. Your data starts getting sold to third-party analysis firms. And the QR code you scanned back in 2025, that was the first step. Jane, she thought she was signing up her QR code for a vacation check for peace of mind. Instead, she ended up with a court date. You might think you were helping your city by scanning that QR code, but instead, you were building a surveillance machine that has no brakes and is a scary place to be in 5 years. This isn't fear-mongering today. This is a system that's working as designed. So before you scan that QR code the next time you're at a community event, ask yourself, who's behind the offer? Where will my data go? And can I ever take it back? Speaking of surveillance and security, what if instead of cops watching you, what if cops show up at your front door and they don't like the fact you have a home security camera? What can you do if cops try to either disable or destroy your security camera? Check out this next video where I break down how to stop cops if they try to disable your security camera. See you over there.